Every now and again we hear in the news about missing person cases. We tend to hear more about the ones that end tragically, but thankfully many do end with a missing person being found safe and well after a short space of time. If I was to ask you what you think the most reported missing person case in modern history has been, I wonder how you might answer. Well, yes, it's been the Madeleine McCann case. This 3-year-old girl who disappeared on the evening of May the 3rd, 2007 from her bed in that holiday apartment in the Algarve in Portugal. Madeleine was on holiday from the UK with her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, with her 2-year-old twin siblings too, and a group of family friends and their children. And one evening, as you'll probably remember, she vanished from the room with, as I'm sure you know, all sorts of theories and investigations ensuing over the days and months and years since. It's now 14 years, and yet her parents haven't given up hope. Tired and worn down as they appear to be, they hold on to the hope that she will one day be found. Such is the strength of parental love, which appears to be as strong today as it was in those harrowing scenes and interviews from 14 years ago. Their pain clear for all to see. We see something similar going on as an image in Paul's letter to the church at Thessalonica, the first letter there, the end of chapter 2, beginning of chapter 3. Paul has previously talked about his bond with these fledgling new Christians being like a mother and like a father. He talks about their relationship as being incredibly joyful. Paul now extends this imagery and talks about the pain of a parent having a child snatched away. And of course, as we know, for a parent, it's agony. And if it hasn't happened to us, I'm sure we can't even imagine the depths of the pain that we feel when losing a child. But this is the image that Paul uses for how he felt when he had to leave the city and leave the Thessalonians behind. And here we have him writing to them from far away. There was clearly a deep bond between them, going back to the image he uses of a nursing mother and an encouraging father. And like an anxious parent, Paul's thought has been all about how to get back to see his beloved children again. There's such a deep, real longing to be with them here. They were his hope, joy and crown, his glory and joy, he says. His desire continues to be the very best for them, that they will run the race well, that they will win the crown of everlasting joy. So for him, them growing and maturing as disciples of Jesus, living fully human, fulfilled lives for their own sake and for the sake of the wider world, was his overriding desire. It was a joy for him to see them thrive. And it wasn't just that he missed them, but that if he wasn't there with them, he wouldn't be able to make a difference. He wouldn't be able to nurture, encourage, exhort or comfort them as he wanted to. Now, parents tend to lie awake at night and worry about their children. It's the way it's always been. Probably most children haven't got a clue how much their parents are thinking about them. Paul and Jesus himself at times, of course, encouraged people not to worry. Don't be anxious, don't be afraid, they would say. And to be sure, a morbid, depressed anxiety which fails to trust God is not a healthy thing. But where we have some kind of responsibility for someone else, and I think it's right to have a certain amount of concern or even anxiety for them expressed appropriately. But what is it that Paul fears then? Well, he says he worries that the storms of life will sweep them off the track, like a ship blown off course. His deep desire is that they should keep their eyes on Jesus and keep on following him without distraction. That appears very strongly to be the focus of his hopes for them, the purpose, if you like, of his friendships. It's highly likely that at this time the church in Thessalonica was suffering persecution. So all the more they needed those things a good mother or father can offer them. Paul wants them to hear the voice of God amongst all the other voices competing for their attention. So he sends Timothy to be with them. Ultimately, there really is no substitute for face-to-face contact. And I wonder if there's something timely about this for us right now too. After the lockdowns and heavy restrictions that we've experienced at the height of the COVID pandemic, isolation, lack of meaningful human interaction, loneliness. According to many, there was a pandemic within a pandemic. And so mental health suffered, relationships came under greater strain. Even now, many people are struggling to connect meaningfully with other people. They've got out of the habit of meeting together. And something precious is being lost. Zoom, WhatsApp and Messenger, useful though they can be, have their limitations. Now, of course, Paul, back in the first century, didn't have Zoom or Messenger, and he clearly thought that letters, although useful, were not enough in themselves. He knew that face-to-face contact and sharing life on life is by far the best way. So he sends Timothy in his place to provide that face-to-face, life-on-life support that he couldn't give them himself. And from all we know, Timothy arrived in Thessalonica with exactly the same motivation as Paul. He came to serve them, to seek their very best, to care for them as a mother, to encourage them like a father, to love them as brothers and sisters, to be these close soul friends. And all this is almost impossible to do well at a distance. And that's why, as we seek to rebuild, restore and renew the life of our church, we are right now giving such attention to relationships. Following Jesus is not something we can do in isolation. He never meant it to be. Friendships within our church family, soul friendships as we're calling them, at their best, will be life-giving and one of the very best ways to learn to thrive as we follow Jesus. And it's something we see throughout the New Testament, isn't it? Jesus called people into community. Yes, with him, but with each other too. And throughout the New Testament, we see Christians working out exactly how this might look in their context. In the book of Hebrews chapter 10, we read this: "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another." And so the questions that we're asking now in this rebuilding period. How can we develop new habits? How can we develop, resource and encourage close friendships? And at the same time, how can we gather together in meaningful ways? Here's a short video clip which begins to explore all this. Hi there. Over the last 18 months or so, we've all developed new habits through the lockdowns and the restrictions, but we've also lost a number of habits that we had before, and maybe those things that we've lost we might regret. One of those things which quite a few people have lost is the habit of gathering together as God's family in church. In chapter 10 of the book of Hebrews, we read this: "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another." There are, of course, patterns of meeting together all throughout the New Testament, and the assumption is that there will be a regular meeting together of followers of Jesus. 18 months ago, we were faced with a new question. How do we gather together during a global pandemic? Many answers to that question came in the form of different online offerings, which were a good thing and which served a purpose at the time and which will serve us well in some ways going into the future. Along the way, many people have lost the habit of meeting together and found ourselves with new habits that have replaced them. And that's nobody's fault. It's a natural thing. But the question is, how can we rediscover the essential habit that the Bible talks about of making gathering together as Christians, as much as possible in person, a priority? So look, I think a question that's really going to help us is this. What are we meeting for? What's the point of gathering together as Christians in a small group or in larger ones? What is the point in developing and deepening our friendships? Well, according to the New Testament, there are two main reasons why we gather together as Christians, and they are to glorify and to edify. It really isn't so much asking what's in it for me, but thinking that us being there in these relationships makes a difference to others in ways which are probably beyond our comprehension. If I'm not spending some time with my Christian brothers and sisters, then part of the body of Christ is missing. We need each other, and we were meant to. So we gather as Christians in whatever size group to glorify God, to worship Him, and to offer ourselves to Him. And we meet together either here in the church building, in small groups, or even one-to-one, to edify each other. And that means to encourage, to comfort, to spur one another on. That's why we are gathering. We meet for a sense of rest, healing, and hope. We meet so that we can recalibrate and remind ourselves of God's perspective on life. We meet together so that we can live lives following Jesus each day on our front lines, being agents of God's love, of His kingdom, in the big things and the small things of life. So you see, there's a reason that God calls us to friendships and to meet together regularly. In fact, there are lots of reasons, aren't there? There's been lots of research done too on the benefits of meeting in groups of different sizes. Each setting gives us different benefits, be it a large group, a smaller group, or one-to-one, whatever. But undergirding them all is a purpose. How they improve our lives and how they improve the life of others. How these relationships, build up the life of the community. So we have opportunities to gather on Sunday mornings and evenings. And we're very much working now on the idea of soul friendship relationships, developing those over the coming months. And one vehicle for these kind of friendships is the idea of a bubble group. Please do download this from the church website. They explain why and how these small groups can be a really helpful vehicle to help us develop these soul friendships, friends who walk the way of Jesus with us through life. Pick them up in the church building too. And if you'd like to explore being part of one of these groups, have a chat with me. Drop me an email. Add your name to the piece of paper in church when you're next in the building. Alternatively, get together with a few others and let me know if you'd like to form a group, and I'll make sure that you have all the resources you need to get started. But can you see how all this builds on what Paul is saying about the importance of thinking of church as family, as being like parents, brothers and sisters, of the necessity of building strong relationships and relationships with a purpose. The purpose being so that we can flourish and thrive as followers of Jesus in the whole of life. This was undoubtedly Paul's motivation for going to Thessalonica in the past, and it's still his motivation for writing them to them and sending Timothy to be with them face to face. I think we would do well to have that same motivation to meet together. Yes, together in a church building or in someone's home, but also to be there for one another, encouraging and equipping, exhorting, comforting each other. May we too be people who give ourselves for others by devoting time to one another, so that we can grow, to flourish, and so that the world around us will see so clearly, in the words of Jesus himself, "By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another." That's from John chapter 13. And this is how we are changed. This is how we grow, and this is exactly what the world around us needs to see and then experience for themselves. Love in action. Love which longs for friendships to flourish, and love which always seeks the ultimate good of the other.